Messi. Messi! Oh my goodness! Balotelli! Aguero! That is extraordinary! What a head, son! What a head!
Back of the net.
Back at base sparks in the software. Flash the message. Something's out there floating in the summer sky. With 99 red balloons go by.
Hello, and welcome to the Not a Pundit podcast. That was 99 Red Balloons as covered by Anna Vryn, a band local, I believe, to Hamilton. And I am delighted to be joined as ever by Nathan Byrne and Conor Glennon, and this week by Director of Football and Board Member of Hamilton Academical, Gerry Strain. Gerry, thank you very much for joining us. How are you getting on? How has the summer window been?
Hi, good evening, lads. Summer window's been fine. I think similar to last year, we got our business done early with anticipation of going on a good cup run. But sometimes, the best laid plans don't come to fruition. So we get knocked out, unfortunately, in the group stages. That's the second year in a row, so we need to do better next year.
Well, we will get on to Hamilton, but I kind of want to start with yourself first, because I believe you did actually come through as a player yourself. And I believe you actually played for Queen of the South. Am I right in saying?
I wouldn't say come through. I wasn't good enough to get in the first team, but I was on the. I was more of a trier. Initially, I went down south actually from school. That never worked out, and eventually you kind of find your level. But I was Rowan Alexander was kind enough to give me a chance at Queen of the South, and then when he brought me in, he realised how bad I was. So I never really got a game. But to be fair, in my defence, there was guys like Jamie McAllister and stuff there who went on to have tremendous careers with the likes of Aberdeen Hearts, and he won the cup with Livingston, and he went down to Bristol. David Lilly went on to a good career as well with Aberdeen and abroad and back to Kilmarnock. So Queen's had a really good team at the time. To be honest, my own head probably wasn't in the right place, because I realised that I wasn't going to play at the level I wanted to play at. And instead of appreciating football for the beauty of it, I probably resented it. I resented the fact that I put so much into something that I wasn't going to get a return from. And it wasn't arrogance, but I just didn't see myself playing junior football or at any level apart from the level I wanted to be at. Now, as a 44-year-old looking back, I wish I'd even played amateur. Because the one thing, time doesn't wait for you. And now that I'm still in football, but certainly a different side of it, you kind of look at the dressing room, you look at the lads, and you can appreciate what you actually missed out on for a number of years just because of stuff.
I'd say though, it gives you perspective with those lads to be able to kind of speak their language, and you didn't go to the ranks that you personally wanted to, but you're in those change rooms, and it's whether it's a top flight team or not, it's usually the same kind of characters knocking around each dressing room.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think football's changed so much that what would have been acceptable to me or normal to me in a dressing room, you wouldn't get away with now. There's no, certainly back when I was a kid, there wasn't any entitlement. If to be entitled, you had to be special. And then you had the pressure of the boys in the dressing room making sure that if you're only special, you knew you weren't entitled. Whereas now I've got a different perspective and stuff, and a lot of people, there is a lot of entitlement in the game. And I think that comes through between a rock and a hard place. The academy thing nurtures that, because you give kids a tracksuit at 10 or 12 and they think they're professional footballers. So that entitlement starts early through the education process, and ultimately what happens is I think it's like 1% of kids make it. Whereas back with the old routine, it was almost like you get picked up if you're good enough to be picked up, and then the journey would begin. And that's where I fell short. For me, getting a chance to go down south was an escape, but I wasn't mature enough to realise that was the opportunity just starting. for me, it was a case of, right, okay, I've landed here and I'm away from a social environment I didn't want to be in. But I wasn't mature enough to appreciate what sat in front of me. Now you've got these academies in place and kids automatically by default think they're footballers by the age of 10 or whatever, and you watch them, they've obviously been copying people off Match of the Day, tiny tackles rolling about the deck, and it just, some of it's kind of frustrating. It's lost a bit of for me it's lost a bit of the beauty, and it's lost a bit of the reality, and the game's changing as well so much, in terms of what players are asked to do, and you hear different phraseologies, your low blocks and all this stuff. And
you see it happening a lot in the UK. That there's kind of the entitlement around academies, and Ireland, we're not as fortunate to have the academy system that's over in the UK. Is it kind of within Scotland? Are you seeing similar to the UK? Is it creeping in slowly, or is it just kind of around the same level as the UK in general?
It's certainly in the game to answer that question, but I think we're lucky at Hamilton. We've had a great academy for years. The academy was set up with us with a guy called Les Gray, Frank McAvoy, who's now assistant manager at at Hearts. They were absolutely outstanding, in terms of what they were doing and how they were doing it. Nurtured players like McCarthy, who played for Ireland. James MacArthur played for Scotland, Brian Easton and so on. And then when Frank left, there's a guy called George Cairns that took over, and he had relative success as well by delivering 2 European campaigns for our under-18s. Now, they'd done that through the delivery of a level of discipline with the kids. The kids all wore black boots. The shirts had to be tucked in. They had to do their chores. These are all good.
Fergie rules,
they're all good values that have a place. And then obviously as time goes on and kids want to express themselves, then they want to stick on a pair of blue boots because they think they're messy or whatever. And I suppose you have to move with the times. But I think because of the good work of Les Gray, Frank, latterly George, I think we've been lucky that our academy's not been one of the entitled ones. I can't pass comment on other ones because it's not my place. But I just know the values of our club are really good and they're really strong. And they're consistent with kind of good old working class values that you would have had that are very kind of reminiscent of older Scotland and Ireland. We're refugees, we're immigrants, my family. So we're kind of Irish by diaspora. I refer to that as home, when I'm back over in kind of Dublin and Meath. So that you see, if you look at the GAA as an example, fantastic community. It's played for the love of the game. It's played for the desire of the game. And to me, that's traditional values that football used to have, but it's moved on a bit from and it's lost.
I think what's beautiful about that, though, is values isn't something you can buy. It's not something you can. Okay, I suppose you can bring in the right people to do it, but I do think at its core, a club either has it or it doesn't.
We're lucky because the club does have it. It has it because it's been instilled from day one with those guys that I'd mentioned previously. The current owner of the club's a Turkish guy, Sheriff Zengin. Again, great guy, just very, very hard-working, very humble. So those values be consistent. And if any of you are familiar with Turkey, the values in Turkey are quite similar. I know it gets a bad rep and stuff, but I don't think that's...
Oh, they're very family-oriented people.
Very consistent, very family-orientated, good values. A firm commitment to honour and so on. And I think those values that Sheriff has will be rolled out across our entire football club. He started doing that already, but it's not been without its challenges.
And how did he come to be involved in the club?
He's been there for 13 years as a significant investor. I think 2 years ago when I first became involved, I attempted to buy the club. The mechanics of it weren't quite right. The stadium wasn't part of the deal, which then made it wasn't commercially viable for me. And the financial resource that I had, I didn't think it was significant enough to take it on. Now, 2 years down the line, I'm happy I didn't take it on because they went to the wall, with my lack of real understanding of how football actually works. But Sheriff was a director when I joined the club. And then last year he acquired the football club minus the stadium. And now he's in the process of trying to acquire the stadium. So he's been in there for years, but he's a grassroots guy. He's been heavily involved with grassroots football for kids at top ages right the way through to 21s and so on. He just loves football. And if you met him, he's quite an inspirational guy. Do you know, he's
It's great that he's been in the background for so long. Like I didn't really realize he'd been around for so long as an investor, and I think that speaks volumes to his I suppose view of where he wants to bring the team.
He's been committed. I think he's a fan in the club. That's because he's been there for so long. He's invested so much into it, both financially, emotionally, mentally. He is a legitimate fan of the club. You can't call it into question. Part of the challenge with me is that I'm viewed as an outsider, maybe. Because I was perceived as someone supporting another club from Scotland, so you don't get a lot of leeway. But the reality is, I've been in there for 2 years, and once you're in it and you invest in it emotionally, that does become your club. But at the same time, I understand to some people who are lifelong fans that bit of acceptance might be more difficult for me to get.
You're only a blow-in.
Again,
Gerry,
no problem.
Gerry, just a quick one from me. In terms of the academy aspect of football, I find it really interesting. How important do you think it is to get through the values of the club into these academies? Because, as you said, I think football's progressed into a way that it's very in my opinion, one-dimensional in terms of here's the tactics that we're going to go out, and a lot of teams follow the same ones. So, how would you think, like, importance-wise, how important it is to get these values into these players?
I think that's the core of your principles. It's really fundamental. That's where it begins as a journey. And utopia for us would be to have 11 homegrown Accies players that have come right the way through that feature in your first team. The reality is that's maybe never going to happen. Do you know that's just because there's players come from everywhere. But if you get it set up where it's fundamentally right and people have got the right values, the right consistency, the right credibility and delivery, there's a greater chance of you achieving, a high percentage of your first team for that background. We finished the season with 11 players in the park who either came through the academy or were part of the academy, moved on to careers elsewhere and came back. So our last game against Kelty Hearts of the last campaign, we played tremendously well. We had a large number of kids, and then we'd senior pros who had left us. One went down to West Ham, some went to other clubs in Scotland and so on. But we finished with 11 in the park who were.
That's amazing, and I think when you've got players coming through at volume like that, even if they move on to other teams, I think if you're instilling those values in them, you're contributing to football as a whole, be it wherever they go. You're kind of sending in a good egg to their team.
Well, it's something. Certainly, I can't take the credit for that, and neither can Sheriff, because those the groundworks for that were in place 10, 15 years ago. Some of the players are coming towards the end of their careers now, and they'd been in our academy maybe 10, 15 years ago. So what we're not saying in our current position is that that's down to us. But I think what it is, though, is very consistent with Sheriff's belief in what he wants to achieve and what he wants the fans to buy into. Our biggest problem is commercial revenue streams are pretty much non-existent for us because Glasgow Celtic and Rangers take the bulk of fans to the demographic area where we're situated. We're a far bigger demographic area than Motherwell, but Motherwell have got 4,500 season ticket holders. We've got 400. Yeah. Do you know? And that, when you look at that in monetary terms, it's a tenfold difference, and it makes a massive difference to your bottom line. In addition to that, one of my concerns, and where I've got a chip on my shoulder, is that although we've represented Scotland in Europe 2 occasions out of the last 5 years by playing in the Champions League equivalent for the 18s, we don't get any money from the SFA or UEFA, but there's certain teams in the SPL who don't have academies, who don't invest as much as we do in the academy, and they get £1.5 million almost per year.
And why is that?
Well, when asked the question, I was told chickens don't vote for Christmas. That's a verbatim answer. And unfortunately, if you complain about it, you're making a rod for your own back with certain people that don't like you asking questions or having an opinion of your own. Football's very political.
Is that referring to the UEFA Youth League? Yeah.
Well, to be fair to UEFA give a pot of cash and it's for the benefit of clubs who are not competing in Europe, so that cash can be distributed evenly across them, and they can then invest it in their youth. And the whole purpose of it is it's to get the academies up and running and nurture talent and grow it. But it's called the caste system in Scotland. It's the elite system. So we're an anomaly. Last year we played in the third tier of Scottish football, where there was 3 full-time clubs and the rest were part-time. But our kids performed in Europe against Molde.
Which is mad, and it's very. I don't know about you boys, but it really reminds me of the Irish football system in that way, that you've got those big players that are the professional teams. You've got teams outside of that are bringing through talent, but all the money's flown one way. But I think the SFA not providing that cash is, I think, the worser end of that, because UEFA, okay, bigger organisation, but you think the SFA would take care of their own, because from other people we've talked to, Scotland is one that comes up a lot for managers, and it seems like the SFA put a lot of cash into the managerial side of the house, but from the playing point of view, it seems like getting left behind in some regard.
Yeah, I couldn't criticise SFA, to be honest, because ultimately they're giving a bit of autonomy to the teams that are the biggest teams perceivably in the league, because they play in the SPL. I have communicated with the chief executive of the SFA, and he's came back to me and he's answered the questions that I've asked. And that's all.
That's all you can ask for, I suppose.
It doesn't put money in your bank. It doesn't help your bottom line. And I guess my bone of contention is morally, I think that we're at a disadvantage. When we put so much into the academy, we give so many kids an opportunity. We feed the kids. We do so much as a community entity. The cost of it is significant for a club our size in comparative terms to our budget, and I just don't think we get the help that's required. That's my gripe. And the only way that we can remedy that is by getting the first team promoted back to the SPL, and then we get a cut of the pie. But on a personal level, I would like to see what I did learn last year through the League One journey that we had. You go down to teams like Annan and Celtic Hearts and Queen of the South and so on. They're real community clubs with a real community focus, with real community academies. They've their own demographic area. They put facilities on. The money should be spread, in my opinion, evenly across the whole of Scottish football, whereby academy facilities are provided.
Yeah, or even a base level that goes out to each team as kind of the I suppose there's a ceiling on the investment, but there is a investment.
Yeah, I just think there's a better way of doing it, and I think in addition to that, if we qualified for the SPL this year through the league, please God, if there was a vote, I would vote for the money to be shared more equally. It wouldn't be a case of that might be against Sheriff's wishes, right enough, but I just think that in the interest of sport and integrity and making things fair for kids all over the place, that there has to be a bigger share of the pie to help them.
Well, it's similar in the sports in America. You look across the NBA, the NFL. It's equal kind of profit share for all teams, whether you've got Ronaldo on your team or you've got insert player. You're getting the same jersey sale cash.
That to me, that's an intelligent model, because it's based in the principles of sport and integrity and trying to enhance the game across all levels, but it's a lack of money in Scotland, I guess, that's hampering a lot of clubs. A lot of people say there's too many clubs. That's a fair and valid point. But then when you go into these clubs like we did in the League One journey last year, and you see that the amount of kids at the games, the game's all about the kids. It's all about the next generations, because that's.
Try to tell the fans whose team shouldn't exist or not.
That's where my brain was going. I was like, how do you make that call?
That's it. But it's like it's the next generations that matter, and I think it's incumbent on us to get kids involved in the game and get kids interested in the game. And no disrespect to Celtic or Rangers, but it's incumbent on us to create more Hamilton fans.
100%.
To take them away from Celtic and Rangers, because it's not that you don't need them, but Scottish football needs fans to support everyone appropriately.
Now, one of the things, though, to give you credit, like rightly or wrongly, with the way the funding model has been kind of handled. You have gotten creative and using your Turkish connections now to build relationships over there and trying to kind of spread the name out a little bit more. Like, is there any of like new ideas that you're bringing through? Because like in fairness to yourself, like you kind of came into the club at possibly the lowest ebb they've been at in 20 odd years. Like, and I have them rebuilding now back fairly sustainably, whilst also putting money where the amount is. I believe you have the second highest fee in club history this summer. Like, there's very little I can see that to criticize of ye, but with everything that's coming up against you.
I think it's not without its challenges. When I joined the club 2022, it was a strange baptism, to be fair. It's maybe not for this podcast, but
you can tell us after.
No, I think obviously my intention was to buy the club for the period of the summer. It never came to fruition because although I could raise the capital to buy the club, that wasn't the issue. It was the long term sustainability of it, and I kind of balked at that without the club. Sorry, without the stadium, without the revenue streams for the shop, without the revenue streams from every other aspect of it. It wasn't a financially viable model for me that I could identify with. And a guy called Colin McGowan, great guy, asked me to get involved with the club to bring in commercial revenues, which I was happy to do. But initially, my position went from director of football to commercial director to whatever else it was, and when I turned up for the first game, we played Morton, first game of the season, into the boardroom, and chairman sitting holding fort, getting everybody to introduce yourself, and a guy called Dave McKinnon, he's a great guy, he played with Rangers and Arsenal, and Dave introduced himself as Dave, the director of football. Next time I was going to say, I'm Gerry, director of football. And then none of the two easy to say in the football side of it. Obviously we get relegated that year, and the changes ensued pretty much the day after we get relegated. They knew one of.
Is that from a playing resource point of view, or everything across the board changes overnight?
I think it became. It wasn't a nice atmosphere. Obviously, getting relegated was quite toxic. The fans, understandably, were kind of pissed off that they viewed the board of directors to have been sleeping at the wheel. I think I've said in other podcasts, my opinion of it was that I don't believe that the club supported the manager the way it should have done. We brought in a great young coach at the time who was cutting his teeth in his first managerial role, a guy called John Rankin. Brilliant career with Hibs and Dundee United and Inverness, and played in Brazil. He was as a kid, he was at Man United as well. He just lives and breathes football. Do you know, he's it's a cliche, but he's a student of the game. But the amount of work and effort he puts into his job is incredible. I mean, you've got somebody like that in your club. I just think you need to give them all the resource that they need to find their way, because he's bound to make mistakes, get things wrong, but fundamentally you need to support him. And because I was acutely aware of players that I had presented to the board and they never came to anything, and Dave McKinnon had chats with Dave, and Dave was putting players forward and never came to anything. When we seen the players coming into the building, it became clear maybe John wasn't satisfied. And then we went up to Cove Rangers at Christmas time. That's when it went really wrong. We had 7 or 8 16-year-olds between the bench and the first team, and you're playing against seasoned pros in the Championship. And
yeah, that's a hard ask for any player or manager for that fact.
I mean, the physicality of it's a massive issue in itself, and then you get the experience, and then you get the inexperience of the manager who's trying to learn. But you can only teach a 16-year-old so much, and expect so much from them. So I thought it was maybe, I didn't think we'd get relegated. I thought we'd maybe avoided it with the skin of our teeth. I suppose in hindsight, it's the best thing that happened to us, because
from a rebuild perspective,
yeah, because it allowed us pretty much overnight to put a 2-year plan in place and attract a calibre of player to the club that the manager specifically identified and wanted, and then allowed us to go on our journey. What we didn't factor into it was that Falkirk would go on an unbeaten run for the season and stroll the league in a fashion that if you look at the previous performance, they'd never achieved beyond 65 points, whatever it was, and last year they were just outstanding. They're invincibles in the league. We never factored that into the equation. We thought that it'd be close.
That was the Joker card in the pack. That
It wasn't
one.
much of a joke, mate. Believe me, it was. It was quite sobering. But we still came up. The objective was to get promoted, and we done it with a crazy number of points. We were miles out in second place, and it pretty much should have won any other league in the country. But Falkirk were just superb, and we couldn't hang on their coattails. We had a lot of injuries and stuff as well. It's not an excuse, but thankfully we get promoted, and therefore the 2-year plan still in place. Because you get immediate bounce back, which I think I don't know if there's any other teams with immediate bounce back. So that to me tells me that the managers get the credentials that he needs. And one of the things that was key was we gave John a 3-year deal prior to the playoff semi-finals taking place. So that was it wasn't a leap of faith on our part. It was a demonstration of faith in him that, we believe we're going to go up, but if we don't, you've got a job for 3 years because we believe you're the right guy to take us on this journey. And honestly, you need to come over. You need to come over for Ireland at some point, and I'll show you around the stadium and show you how John works.
100%.
It's not until you see how a guy like this works, you appreciate just what goes into a game. Do you know, I've been involved with other managers, whether I've been scouting or whether I've been doing stats or analysis. It's just the level of detail that he puts into his work, the level of effort, level of communication, the level of integrity. And that's, to me, that's just phenomenal. And I feel now that he's been backed in a way that demonstrates his value.
Well, it's great to see that being rewarded in that way. I should say before we go on, we've talked to a lot of personalities around football, some of which have been in the director of football space, and it kind of seems to change from country to country. I suppose as succinctly as possible, what is the role of a director of football, I suppose, in Scotland? And because it seems like it's across everything. God bless you, you're wearing a lot of hats.
It depends what club you're at, I think. If you're at a club with a lot of resource and a lot of finance behind them, you specifically deal with football.
Right. Okay.
At Hamilton, God, where do I start? You're ordering toilet rolls. You're picking up. You're picking up. The energy gels and the water, and you're arranging kit because it didn't turn up, and you're dealing with players' complaints. You're
soup to nut logistics.
Last week it was payroll because we had an issue with the bank. We missed, some of the players get paid in time and some get paid a day later because we couldn't access our bank account for a security thing, and you end up having to get involved with that to find a contingency to get people paid. It's not what it is. It's more of a kind of holistic chief exec's role probably at a smaller club because the resources are far more less available, and the headcount isn't there either. So you're doing everything you're doing a lot of your own research, you're doing a lot of your own recruitment and stats and analysis, and then you're bouncing off the manager, and he maybe no fancy what you put in front of him, so you're looking again, and you're working with your own recruitment guys and your own network. I've got a really good network in Ireland because that's where my family's from, and got a lot of good contacts there. I've probably got a bigger network in Ireland than I do here.
Just because you touched on it, I did come across an article about the payroll issue. Is one of the hats you kind of have to put on every so often to become like the team's Alistair Campbell per se, where you're kind of become the little media manager and trying to deal with that. Like how front facing does the role intend to be, like when something like that? Are you the one that kind of comes out on behalf of the owner and says, listen, this is an issue on our side, we're going to fix this? Or is it a little bit more kind of press things, just do press things?
No, I think specifically in dealing with that issue, it was one that it only landed in my lap the day that the wages were due, and I'd received an email from someone else within the club, and I don't normally read these emails, to be fair, but I got this email and I thought, that looks as though it needs read. I don't know, it's just a gut.
Yeah, you got the gut.
And I was out in my car. I was actually out I've got a business away from the football club, and I was out carrying out my own business duties. So I started scrolling through it, and I quickly realised that it was an issue with security and signatories. And I phoned the guy that sent me the email, and I said, "What's happened with this?" And he says, "Well, the bank haven't phoned me." And I remember sitting thinking, banks don't phone you now. Do you know they're right?
Yeah.
So right away, it was alarm bells and concern, and it was AIB, Allied Irish Bank, who pulled out of Scotland. I think they've actually pulled out of the UK, and they're pretty much based now in Ireland. And they've got very kind of restrictive opening hours, 9 to 5, and that's it. They don't have a chatbot service. They don't have a customer service line that extends beyond 5 o'clock. And I'm thinking, shit, we've got 4 hours to get people paid. Now, the payroll was done the Tuesday, through you do your Sage and you submit it to HMRC, not nonsense to keep compliant. But I remember thinking, how am I going to get everyone paid in 4 hours when we can't access the bank? The funds were there. There wasn't an issue with
That's the frustrating bit. It's right in front of you. You just can't pull the trigger on it.
There wasn't an issue with gathering the funds in. So somebody for the bank kindly offered to do a manual process, right, which was brilliant, going above and beyond for us. And one of the criteria was that they would try and do it. Right, and I'm thinking that word "try" just scared me. So I kind of elaborated a bit further, and what she basically said was, I can't guarantee that we'll get people paid. So I'm like, I can't afford my people to not have money hitting the bank. I can't afford.
And are you having players coming at you directly, kind of going, "What's the story here?" or is it kind of just like a kind of figuring it out and the odd person connecting with you? And asking?
I think so. What happened was that I wasn't aware. On the day the wages were due, it was the 31st of July, because we'd be paying the last day of the month. So as far as I was concerned, there's a manual process taking place and people get paid, and we had to trigger on that, to be fair. And it became apparent at 9 o'clock on the Wednesday night, one of the kids messaged me, we're 18s, and he said that we've been paid today, and I'm thinking, right, well, if you've not been paid, there's maybe a chance that not everybody's been paid. I immediately drafted a message to all our staff, and I was like, we've got a group chat, and I furnished them with information on that I didn't believe everyone had been paid, so could they then let me know who was missing their salary, and we could guarantee they'd get their wages. That there wasn't any uptake on that. I think 3 people had contacted me. So, but by default, I'm sitting thinking, right, there's either only 3 people not being paid, or people just don't want to communicate back to me. And what happened after that disappointed me, because I had provided correspondence from the bank substantiating the real position on it. It wasn't a sleight of hand therein. And then I learned for one of the newspapers that the players had walked out. So I was disappointed in that, because at 8 o'clock that morning, it's obviously the messages are time-stamped and so on. At 8 o'clock that morning, I'd basically reached out to ask who's not been paid, let me know, and we'll make sure you get paid today. And then the next
doing what you can,
and then the next correspondence I had was for the newspapers. So I guess by default that puts you in the firing line, Killian. And I'm certainly not any Alistair Campbell when it comes to spin. I've not got any time for bullshit. I don't have any time for bullshit, because I'm not prepared to look somebody in the eye and lead them a yarn. It wasn't how I was brought up. It wasn't how I was brought up. It's not how
goes back to the values of the club in that way.
Well, these are my family values. That came from being taught, and my nana, she's for Kildare and stuff, and they just good working class values that you treat people with respect and be honest. It's like, it's not difficult. It's probably harder to tell a lie. Because you need to tap into that creative part of your brain to come up with a lie. Whereas just go and tell the truth, and if you tell the truth and people know what they're dealing with, then you can deal with it more quickly and more openly. But in the defence of my players, if I'd been in a dressing room, I'd probably have stuck with them. I wouldn't have walked out. I would have kept my private business in-house. I probably stayed in the dressing room, because, at the end of the day, if they weren't paid and they go and get injured, and let's just say the club didn't have the money, of course, so I get that side. I don't have an issue with that at all. I guess my only issue was the communicative side, where
There's not too many industries in the world where something like that happens, and the papers are one of the first to hear about it, and that's why it was fascinating for me, just to kind of like, how do you deal with that? But not to dwell on things like that. You touched on it a couple of times, and you're saying about bringing players to the manager. You have great ties with Ireland, and I must ask you, what part of Meath is your family from? Because I'm from Meath myself, but you've signed in this window 2 Irish guys. Have you? I know one of them I think came from Coleraine, another one came from within the Scottish leagues. Have you seen any, or has there been any moves that you wanted to do, been affected by Brexit? Because like it was one of these kind of boogeymen for the longest time in terms of football transfers, and it hasn't been quite as severe as initially intended, but we're seeing it over here with a lot more guys going to the continent rather than the traditional England, Scotland, through the ranks and into the Irish setup then maybe.
I think the Irish market's a market of great potential. There's a lot of tremendous players there, and I think that goes back to, again, it goes back to how Ireland's set up, for the ground upwards, with the way the schooling's set up, and you get I don't still the same, you get your half day Wednesday for your GAA. Is that still part of the curriculum? Has that changed?
Not anymore, but there's definitely kind of if you're part of the GAA team, as I wasn't, you definitely get lighter treatment.
So I think see purely because you've got people involved in ball sports, the levels of fitness are naturally there. The levels of athleticism and the physiology, you could argue, is better than somebody that's just playing one sport. It's just soccer or football. Over there, you've got Hully, you've got your GAA and so on. And I think from a fitness perspective, if you get someone that buys into their career through the whole youth system, particularly in Ireland, you're getting a player that's fit, that's conditioned, and that's good to go. In terms of ability, you need to just look at some of the players who produced. Damien Duff, like really, really special talents. Roy Keane, and the list's endless. And they all originated through playing with, Duff obviously kind of Rupert Dublin, Keane down in Cork and so on. So I think if you've got an infrastructure in place over there that can identify talent young, we could be a stepping stone to allow them to get to the Premier League, either in Scotland or in England, as we have been as pathways for other kids. To contrast that, however, the view of the SFA would be that we need to look after your own homegrown talent. And that's where the complexities of Brexit kick in. Because for me to bring in a kid that's like your 15 GBE points, it's unlikely you're going to get that. So you're fishing in a pool you can't afford to be in if you're Hamilton Accies. Because there's a company called Centrefield, I think it is, and they can help you bring a player in from abroad within like 48 hours, but you'll pay through the nose for it.
Oh, wow.
They know what they're doing. They're geared up for that. For me to go and do it through the traditional route, you're maybe 4 to 6 weeks. One of the good things about the SFA
for an English player, is this,
No.
or is this for an Irish player,
for
or
a foreign player, a non UK?
Yeah.
But the SFA, where they're really, really good and really supportive, is that you can request a dispensation, and you can request a panel meeting and present a case for bringing a player in or wanting to sign a player. So the SFA are really supportive in that respect. But at the same token, when
is that a case of having to pick your battles with those panel meetings, or is it for the most part they're pretty fair?
Well, I think I'd like to think they're fair. I can't say too many experiences. I think maybe I can only imagine if you piss them off, they're not going to be very helpful. Yeah. It's just human nature. But I'd like to think they were, because the SFA now, certainly, over the kind of last period, seem to be a kind of transparent organisation. It's progressive. They might know of the rep for that. You get a lot of bad PR because people like to focus back. But if you look at the progress they've made, the transitions they've made, and the people they've brought into the SFA, it seems quite forward thinking, quite progressive, and I've always found them helpful. Same with largely the SPFL, I found most of the people in there helpful as well. So I think that they just want what's best for the game, but not at the detriment of pathways for our kids. And I think that's where they kind of find balance and challenges. If we've got an academy of 298 kids, they're not all going to make it. You can only have 11 in your team at a time. So I just think that if I had a magic wand and I could pick how the football setup goes from 18s to the first team, we don't have anything in Scotland. There's no 21s, there's no 23s, there's no reserves per se. When I was growing up,
So that's a colossal jump to go from 18 to senior team.
massive. You'd need to be exceptional. You'd need to be physically ready. You'd need to be mentally ready. You need to be good enough. So I think it's unfair that clubs in all across Scotland, Rangers and Celtic included, put so much into the development of these kids, and then they get to a certain level, and it's like, right, they need to go down south to academies up to 23s to give me a chance of making it. I think we're missing a trick by not having reserve football, because I know, when I found out I wasn't good enough, it was playing reserve football with pros that knew what they were doing, and they talk you through games, and you learn more for that than playing against somebody your own age that doesn't know what they're doing. Do you know the education that I would have got in a park with like a Frank McAvenny or a John Moncur or or Rowan Alexander teaching me to do? You get an education for them based on 20 years of their career. Whereas if you're playing 18s against 18s or 23s against 23s, you're learning at the same rate as a 23-year-old. Do you know? And I just think that's where it hinders the development of the kids.
Yeah, the football IQ really gets kind of, I suppose, the development comes a lot quicker if you're around those elder statesmen, shall we call them?
Well, if you look at Wayne Rooney, you could argue Wayne Rooney was a man at 16, but when you take that man and you put him into the Everton team, and then he progresses because he's playing with better players, and then he goes to Man United and becomes a world legend. Do you know that he?
It's funny you say that, because as soon as he said it, that's the one who came into my mind, like Duncan Ferguson and those kind of guys around him.
And that to me is where you get your nourishment and your growth, because you'll soon find out in the dressing room, and this is going to, I don't want this to sound sexist, particularly in the environment we're in, people can identify as forks and all that, but as if you're in a male dressing room with guys that are holding you accountable but educating you at the same time, you soon find out what kind of substance you've got to you. And it's that substance that will take you through a career. Do you know, it's really, really clear. Are you going to resent it and turn against it and throw your toys at the pram and be petulant, or are you going to stand up to it, grow up, mature, and progress and develop? And I think that comes through playing, men's football at that level or women's football at that level with senior players that have been there and done it.
And like I know, as you mentioned, elder statesman, am I right in saying there was a certain Scottish international you did try to sign this year that would be an elder statesman?
Are you stirring the pot now, Killian? Is that what you were doing?
No, I saw a story about was it one Mr. Gary Hooper?
Yeah, well, he's no Scottish. Yeah, he's English. Yes, I did. Yes, I tried to sign him in January, and I was advised by Barnett that he wasn't available. And then I tried to get him again through. It was Neil Lennon. Neil's obviously a kind of well-established manager at Champions League level. He signed Hooper a few times. He brought him to Omonia Nicosia before Hooper came back to the UK, and I tried to get hold of him through him and sign him, but it never. He basically retired. He's retiring. So, but I think he'd have been great because of the experience he's got and the ability he's got. We needed something like that in the team. Sometimes your ambition, is, it's maybe a step too far.
You're a football intermediary as well, aren't you? Or at least kind of have the qualifications or certifications required with that. Is that kind of, I suppose, was that pre your role with Accies, or is it kind of in conjunction?
No, you're not allowed to be whilst you're involved with football. There's a conflict of interest there.
Okay.
So it was, and again, the reason for that was it was a passion. So because I know what it feels like to fail, and because I know how to deal with the adversity of that, and I know why I failed. So I can sit down with a kid and have an honest conversation with him about this is the possibility. Do you know? I don't mind having that conversation, but my motivation and my drive for doing that role was to try and get as many kids, or keep as many kids in the game that I could, through giving them the reality of how horrible failure is. Because the truth is, 44-year-old, it still lives in me today. Do you know? And it's a 26-year-old lesson. You know, and But the good thing is I've taken that education into business, and the principles that they let me doing, they've not let me down in business because I've kind of ticked those boxes. But I think I'm well enough versed to have that conversation with people and be honest with them. And so it wasn't.
Well, fair play to you. It's not blowing smoke at you. That's a really noble thing because I think we've all seen the documentaries of the kids that get turfed out of football, 15, 16, and where things can go for them and how they can kind of quit the game. So to keep them involved or to keep them, progress them on and help them on that journey is really impressive.
No,
mate.
thank you. But I think there's a lot of better people than me haven't made it. And I find that, I don't know if hurtful is the right word. That's an emotion in it, but I don't like seeing good people fail. I just don't like seeing it. Well, that's an inherent part of me from my upbringing and watching the fact that my granny had to jump ship from Ireland to Scotland years ago, and I just don't like seeing good people struggle or good people fail. And I'd always put my weight behind underdog, always. And there's a bit of weight about me now, so.
And Gerry, say a club like Hamilton, when they're going out to look for players to recruit and stuff, how much resources gone behind that? What way are they going about it? Are they flying out to see players, stuff like that? And say the players in Ireland that you might identify, what sort of clubs would you be battling for them type of players?
Well, that's a cracking question, to be honest. I think because of the ambition at Hamilton, there's players we wanted that signed for St Mirren last year. Right. And St Mirren obviously qualified for Europe. Robinson's doing a tremendous job there. Another Irishman, he's doing a great job there. Now, the positives I take for that are that my manager wants those players. Right. So if Stephen Robinson's taking those lads and got them into Europe, then my manager's got an eye for a player. Right. So we're ambition's right. It's maybe just that the finances don't stack up with ambition. So to answer that question in a fine point, there's St Mirren and the likes of St Johnstone, and then Airdrie this year signed Ben Wilson for Cliftonville. I'd asked to sign him, and his agent said, "Wouldn't you let us talk to him?" And it turned out he went and done a deal with Airdrie. So I've got a great contact in Ireland, a guy called Gerry Cassidy, and Gerry tried to keep me in the game when I was a teenager.
Is he former scout for Celtic?
Gerry was head of recruitment for Celtic over there, and then went to Blackburn Rovers for about 15 years. Now, Gerry opened a lot of doors for me, when the Swindon piece didn't work out, and I was kind of between clubs, and he's got a lot of contacts in like Scandinavia and Australia and in Europe. And I've maintained a relationship with Gerry all those years because I appreciate the effort he put into helping me out. I'm trying to keep him in the game, but he keeps knocking me back, but football needs guys like Gerry Cassidy in the game because he gets it. He's a proper scout. He just doesn't rely on analytics. He'll go and watch games. He understands football. He understands the physiology of the movement. He's got a great eye for a player. And I think we need people like that. So I tap into Gerry as often as I can. And then when we've got another boy, Jonathan Patterson, who works for us. He's our head scout in Ireland. Jonathan will pass me over players, and I'll bounce them off Gerry as a sanity check. Not that I don't trust. It's not that I don't trust Jonathan's judgment. It's just that because I know Gerry's so well versed in the game and the contacts that he's got, if he ratifies something that comes to me for one of our own scouts, then I know we're on to a winner. And that kind of happened with the likes of Ben Wilson and like Benji McGee at Loughgall and stuff. And so Dean Linus, we signed Dean. Dean was obviously over he won the Player of the Year with League Ireland last year. He's our goalkeeper. So we're very active in that market. But it's down to the people who are over there. We've got a lot of good people over there who are keeping an eye out for us. Aaron Callahan. Aaron was at Bowes and Carrick Rangers and so on. I've got a great relationship with Aaron. So there's that many people that we can tap into and that will keep us right. And I say I've got a passion for that market because that's my heritage, that's my culture, that's where my family are from. So again, there's a natural desire to see people who you relate to do well.
And say, Gerry, yourself in your role, obviously, like say clubs in the Scottish Premier League and the English Premier League, they get to plan like so far ahead. How much of your role is day-to-day stuff coming at you that, you know, can shape and change the road the club's on?
This last week, it's been minute by minute. It's not been day by day. You know, you get challenges
Yeah.
maybe the governance, the governing bodies, and so on. You need to answer to them, obviously, and that impacts your day because it's no part of your normal curriculum. You've then got a dressing room of 24, and you've got a youth academy of 26. Do you know? And then you need to go and address those concerns and give explanations, and then that just eats into your time. Then you've got the perception of the club, and so this last week's been a week for hell. Do you know? And it's no.
And we're just making it worse for you.
This is take for me. Do you know? It's a kind of it's not the norm. Normally, I mean, the manager works so far in advance; it's incredible. You know, it's like planning, preparation. The academy works so far in advance. We've got a coach's manual. A guy called Sean Fagan's absolutely incredible. He's been with the club for years, working in the academy infrastructure. We brought Gordon Young in, former Cove Rangers assistant manager, and he was with Motherwell and so on. Youngie's now academy director. So these guys are working ahead of themselves with the coaching manuals, and it's all in line with the ethos of the club and how we want to play and so on. Then Charlie Mulgrew, I hired Charlie as our 18s manager, the former Celtic Scotland player. So he's coming in, he's got his own ideas, and he needs to maybe learn to adjust to how the academy works, but put his own spin on it. So that's a hell of a challenge he's got, given the career that he had and the fact that he's now in a coaching role and it's a rebirth of a career again in a different way. So that's all at the back of your mind. And then you've got the normal staff, you know, you've got your office staff, your ticket staff. It's a very small club in terms of the staff that manage infrastructure. I think the biggest challenge we've got is the guy who owned the stadium before and owned the club before. He had it running down to a T. Do you know, it was running sweet as a nut because he had a core of incredible staff who carried out several or a dozen incredible roles. And then when that transition changes and you're left with like 2 or 3 people,
it's a lot to take on.
Like, shit, what do we do? Do you know, how does this work? Do you know, and you just need to ask questions and you need to sop up a lot. So I guess to answer that, Nate, you've got, when it comes to the football side, touch wood, I'm content with the job that I've done and what I've delivered in terms of putting an infrastructure in place. We've now got our own medical department. We've got our own scouting department. We watch 47 games a week.
Wow, Jesus.
And that was, and we've then got our own sports science and nutrition department. So all this stuff's in place that wasn't directly in place before. I put that in place last season. We're now enhancing it. Football is my priority. And John Rankin and Darren McKinnon are my priority. That's assistant manager and manager, respectively. So when it comes to working with them, we'll sit down in October for the kind of January window to know who we're going to get. Often we'll try and have players lined up to come in at the start of January. And then when it comes to the next season, I had 2 lists that I was basically going to set about effective the end of April. Didn't matter if we were promoted or stayed in League One. I had 2 listed on it, and the first list was Championship because we wanted to come up. So that was how do we attract Premier League players to the club, because that's where we want to get to. And if we remained in League One, it's like the players that are on the periphery of the team, how do we move them on and bring other players in that want to play League One for another year? Thankfully, and you know, I didn't have to go after the League One option, you know, but that preparation is done well in advance. And just to go back to the point about where Hamilton are as a club, I had a boy, Declan McKean, working for me, who was at Bristol City and came in and he done my head of analysis and he helped me with recruitment. He moved on to work with Hearts.
Wow.
So I started working with Declan back last June, and he had a meteoric rise in terms of, you know, his progression. Hearts wanted him, and he left and joined Hearts at the end of April. But his commitment to the club, he stayed with us basically from March through to the end of the season because he was committed to John and seeing the task through. And I think that's
Says a lot
Oh,
about
it
him,
says a
you know.
lot. He's a great guy, absolutely great guy, and if he'd ever come back to the club would welcome him back. But it says a lot about the character of him, and that character is evident in John, Darian, Sean Fagan, it's Jimmy Thompson. It was the stadium manager. That same character's there throughout everyone, and that makes it a good place to be. So the football bit, I'm banging top of it, and we work in advance. The rest of it, I'm scratching my arse and chasing my tail.
And how are you feeling for the upcoming season? I think you're a game in now. Where are you kind of aiming for? Are you aiming for top end of the league, or is it solidify this season, build on it next year?
Falkirk Invincibles, that's all we're looking for.
We can't be invincibles now. We get beaten Saturday. I think it's a great question, and without putting a rod in your own back, my own inherent personal belief is that we need to get out of the league. That's my own values, my own drive, my own. It's pointless being in it if I just want to stay in it. So how quickly can we get to the Premier League? And that ticks boxes for me on a personal level because of my own ambition, because of my own desire, because of question marks the fans have got over me. Maybe not a great relationship with them all for going in there. So I just think that if I deliver, then I prove my worth. And that's a drive and that's a burning passion I've got to go and deliver. But the reality is that there's a hell of a lot of good clubs in this league, and it's probably one of the toughest leagues in Britain. I'm sure, at the risk of being wrong here, I'm sure there was 5 points between Morton in 5th place and Inverness Cali at the bottom, or the second bottom, and Inverness get relegated. I'm sure it was a 5-point difference. So that's an idea of how close that league is. And then when you look at the results on Saturday, I think there was only 3 teams won. Or 2.
Wow.
So it's small
It's
differences.
tiny different, and there wasn't any massive doings amongst the score lines. It wasn't like a 5-0 or whatever. I actually thought our game with Ayr was a very close game, but they just that wee bit extra that we didn't. But to counter that, we had a man sent off, and we picked up an injury to one of our centre halves, another centre half, and we hit the bar twice, hit the post. So there wasn't a massive amount in it, but.
And in that promotion run, who are you guys seeing as your biggest threat to promotion this year?
I think you take a pick out of 6 or 7. I mean, that you've got Wraith Rovers have always been up there and about. Partick Thistle's the same. I think Ayr United, with the way they've invested heavily, they've got a great board of directors, a great owner, a great infrastructure there. It's admirable the way they've went about their business. They've obviously got Scott Brown as manager, and he's attracted some big players. We lost out in 3 of them that they signed, purely because we couldn't afford to be in that race. So they've got to be up there. Falkirk have had the consistency, a really good team. Now for this will be their second season. They've started well. They've got a good manager. They've got a good board and a good backing. There's quite Livingston as well. Davy Martindale was a tremendous guy. They've got the benefit of having the money for coming out of the SPL, plus having the academy monies, and they've invested really well. They've put a big team together. Davy's a great coach, another good, honest guy. So that when you look at that, it's like, how do you get out of this? And it's going to be tough, but I enjoy the fight. Do you know what? I enjoy that wee bit of, you might not be the biggest, but it doesn't mean you can't be the best.
Absolutely. And in fairness, Hamilton has always been a club that has produced some fantastic talents. James McCarthy, James MacArthur, Alex Neil, Martin Canning on the managerial end of things, and now John Rankin. It's we're going to be rooting for you now from Ireland, and hopefully we'll get over as soon as we can.
I sincerely mean that. You're welcome over any time, because it'd be good to show you about it and let you see how it actually works.
Be great to see it.
Genuine education, and it's a club like no other. You come in, you think, Jesus Christ, it's like.
I have to ask before we go. There's a certain Irishman who's a free agent at the moment. Now we have no connection to him, but there's talk over this side of the water that Aaron Connolly is in talks with Galway. Would he be kind of a caliber of player that you guys would be, interested in, or is kind of I suppose going back to Nate's question, is the vision of the club players like him or homegrown or what is it?
The vision of the club's ultimately success. And
Mm.
who can take you there quicker. As Killian mentioned earlier, we signed two Irishmen, Sean McGinty and Dar O'Connor. Been chasing Dar for years. And
Right.
for 2 years we've been chasing him, and finally, we managed to get him on board. The only thing I'd say is like the monetary aspect in Ireland is pretty significant. When you look at Shells and Bowes and St Pat's, Derry City, these guys are paying good money. Arguably, it's Premier League wages over here. Scottish Premier League wages.
Wow,
that's. I was speaking to a boy for Derry City that's probably on twice my highest wage.
Really?
Really?
Do you know? And
that's what's funny over here. Like, it's obviously it's quite public what players earn across the UK, but in Ireland it's fairly lock and keyed for the most part at the big teams anyway.
And the general assumption would be that it's like, oh yeah, you're doing fine.
Yeah.
Well, no, I looked at a centre forward for Athlone last year, and I liked the model they had there, bringing players in from America and the Caribbean and so on, moving them on. And I looked at the boy up, the big centre forward they had, and it was affordable for us. And then he got his move, and when I was chatting to his agent and I found out he was going to be earning in the Irish League, I was thinking, I need to rule myself out before we even get started.
Yeah.
But he fitted the model of what we're looking for in terms of the goals scored, the minutes played, his XG and so on, and that was, he ticked all the boxes in terms of how he looked physiologically. He ticked that box as well. He was an athlete, but then we end up, we signed Ollie Shaw, tremendous player that played in the SPL for Barnsley. We signed Nikolai Todorov, again another big player. So we've covered that area off. But going back to the point about Aaron, he's a tremendous player. He's a great player, and you might not be on a list I've got.
Jay, just a quick one. Like, you mentioned your relationship with the fans. I'm a United fan. I know how much we expect of our directors, and most of the time, not to a reasonable degree where we probably expect too much. It's how do you go about managing your relationship with the fans and like realizing that sometimes some of the decisions you make might not be ones that they enjoy, but ultimately behind the scenes it's the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah. See, because I'm a fan, I find that easy to relate to, Nate. I'd like to think I don't have any years of graces about me as a human. I love football as a game. I love it as a sport, and I love it as an outlet for people to get careers. But I also understand it as a supporter. I think my challenges with the fans were of a kind of personal nature. The club kind of trusted me to run a kind of Facebook platform, and in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have done it. But it was during the period, John Rankin's first year at the club, and we were getting beat most weeks, or we were drawn, and it was hard for fans to watch, and it was hard for fans to take. And I was trying to convince them that everything would be all right. So in hindsight, I was on to hiding to nothing. But at the same token, there was a lot of stuff that we were watching that there's a lot of decisions went against us, goals that we scored that weren't given, that would have changed the games and would have kept us up. That would have changed the course of fate. I now think we're in a far better place in terms of infrastructure and how we're set up. And I think where it went wrong with me and the fans was that I was trying to be honest with them. I was acutely aware of how they perceived that. And then it went terribly wrong, because it just kind of blew up. One of our staff was involved in a situation with fans online. The girl was identified, and rightly or wrongly, I made some content whereby I addressed the specific fans directly, and it blew up in a horrible way that affected my family and my kids. Genuinely, it didn't affect me because it's water off a duck's back. It's the opinion of someone else is none of my business. That's how I've kind of been brought up. So I can live with it, and I can understand that everybody's got a different opinion, and the opinion of you three is just as valid as mine. But I don't need to take it on board. I don't need to take it to heart. I think that all I can do is continue to be honest with the fans when I'm appraising a situation, or if I'm asked a question, they'll get the truth. Whether they believe that or not is up to them. I don't have any control over that. what I would say is that I care about them. I care about them all in an equal fashion. I'd like to think that my actions in terms of my delivery for the football club are reflective of their ambitions, and where they want to get to. But you're not going to keep everybody happy, and I'm not going to try, because if I try to do that, then I'll not do my job. But I think you need to be mindful of the fact that they all contribute to the club, so they've got a say. And
you really do forget that I suppose people in football in general, whether it's players, managers, directors, you kind of forget they have a family outside of the two goalposts, and it's something that I think more fans need to remember.
Well, yeah, a funny story. My son's a Hamilton fan now. Right, he's 13 years old. He's Hamilton daft. I'll ask him if he wants to go to support a different team with his family, and he's like, no, I'm coming with you. And he just loves it. Right? He loves it. And I'm delighted with that, because it's broken a cycle, of this is the norm. I've got a 13-year-old kid that's making up his own mind. As a dad, that's what I want to do. So there's no bias to it. It's just he'll make up his own mind, and I'm maybe asking him to go somewhere else with his uncles or his brother, his cousins, and he's like, no, I'm coming to support Hamilton. And then he's brought 5 or 6 of his mates with him who are now Hamilton fans. So purely by default, we've now got like 10 or 12 new supporters who actually support the club. That's a good thing. But the flip side of it is, when the abuse was very kind of personal and very vocal, he didn't know. He was only an 11-year-old boy, right? So he's sitting.
That's tough.
So he's hearing songs about his dad and this, and I'm kind of big on reflection and manifestation. So I think, how do I deal with this as a dad? You don't get a rule book or a textbook telling you how to be a dad, right? And you've got this wee guy that's emotionally bankrupt because he's drained any energy he's got looking at his dad getting abused. And I was sitting and said to him in the car, I was like, remember Dad told you, you need to manifest? And aye. I says, well, when I was a wee boy, I wrote down that I wanted people to sing about me in a football stadium.
You got there in the end.
I wasn't specific about what I wanted. So that's why you need to be specific. If you want people to sing, you need to write the song you want them to sing, because it didn't have F's and B's and fat C's in it. It was. but I said to him, I says, I'm basically getting what I asked for. I put it out there to God, the universe, wherever it goes, and and you dream of that adulation as a football player. And you hear folk singing your name not as a kid, and you're celebrating to imaginary crowds and all that, and then 44-year-old, you've got like a couple of hundred people standing in front of you calling you a fat bastard. Gerry, get to fuck, and it's like, and it's just a bit. I think maybe I'm lucky with the upbringing I've got. It wasn't really daunting for me. I could take it for what it was, because I've obviously pissed them off, inadvertently and without trying. It's pissed them off, and it's just sort of sticking sore plaster. It's it's just there. But you can only hope by doing your job and doing it honestly that bridge will. That gap will be bridged, and
100%. And they can't complain if balls are going in the back of the net. So
that's it. We still can. There's other things.
But a promotion will definitely put a plaster over that. Gerry, I want to thank you so much. It's been enlightening, entertaining, and just fascinating overall. Where can people find yourself and the club if they want to keep up to date?
The club website is acciesfc.co.uk, and then they're on Twitter as well. Just look for the blue tick. That's the original. What's it you call that? That's the verified account. Aye. And then we've got TikTok and Instagram. They're 2 platforms that are being built up just now, on Facebook as well. You're a gentleman, Gerry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Nate. Cheers, Connor.
Messi. Oh my goodness! Balotelli, Aguero! That is extraordinary! What a head, son! What a head! Back of the net.